For Oasis Audio, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Terry Helwig is the author of Moonlight on Linoleum, a very personal memoir of growing up in a difficult family situation. Terry joins me on the phone right now to talk about the experience of writing this book and telling her story. Terry, thanks for your time today, and thanks for taking what had to be a very hard path and going back over the details of a very painful childhood for you.
Yes, I appreciate being here, and certainly writing this story had some difficult moments in it. Of course, I've had some time over the years to be able to resolve those issues, but it brought it up very fresh when I was writing it, and I likened it to some of my friends as if I were in a hot air balloon and sometimes had to descend into the abyss to write about it. But I also knew that I would be able to come up any time that I needed to take a break. Mm-hmm. And what I really appreciated was some of my friends saying they would hold the tether lines for me.
Oh, so good, yeah.
That was very nice.
Yeah. But what ultimately convinced you that this story needed to be told and needed to be heard by other people?
Well, a lot of times people, when they would hear my story, they would go, oh, but, you know, you seem so normal, or you sound so normal. And, of course, that's a question up for debate. But what I realized is that we don't have to be hostage to our story, and that our circumstances don't have to define us. And I remembered one time, my sisters and I are very close as a result of our childhood, and we had a family reunion, and we were all cooking in the kitchen together, and we were teasing and all of that, and I just looked around at this group of phenomenal women, in my opinion, and I thought, you know, I don't know if we're here in spite of our childhood or because of it, but one thing I know for sure is that our mother gave us to each other. And I thought maybe it is time to tell our story.
And as people listen to the audiobook or read the print edition, they'll understand that your sisters are actually half-sisters in some cases, right?
Yes,
yeah.
Right.
It must have been difficult, though, to kind of go back and in a sense, relive some of those tough memories.
Yes, it was. Some of those memories were very vivid to me, and so I had a lot of charge around those memories. That's what makes us remember scenes and everything. So I would ask sometimes the help of my sisters when we were putting scenes together and see what they remembered, and it was incredible. It was a really good and learning experience because we realized that we all reacted differently to our childhood. What was painful for one wasn't so painful for another, and what one would remember vividly, another would not. And so our birth order had a lot to do with what was going on and our personal emotions at the time.
So you didn't have to rely on just your memory to reconstruct the past, but you had your sisters to lean on as well. But, I mean, the book that you've written here, it almost could be a novel in a sense.
Well, a memoir is really the true story of a protagonist. And I think that whether you're writing fact or fiction, scene and dialogue are so important. And so what I did, and I think I maybe approached my memoir a little differently, is that I wrote all of my vivid memories down on a yellow sticky notes. And I put those on the inside of a closet door. And I asked myself, why out of all of the thousands and millions of memories of my childhood, why do these stand out? And so instead of using scenes to create the story, I started to unravel the story that was beneath the scenes. And I often found that these memories they came with, like I said, this emotional charge, and it would be feelings of awe or abandonment or happiness or despair. And I think it's like we all know where we were when 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. And, you know, so when you have something traumatic, it kind of locks in that scene vividly for you, and you have that for recall.
That's fascinating to hear how you actually kind of storyboarded your own life, in a sense, with those sticky notes.
I did.
Was it therapeutic to do that?
It was. What started to happen is I just started to see not only my story, but the story of my sisters. I began to see a bigger picture, to understand more motivations that were behind perhaps some of the actions that happened in the book. And so I did find that it was very healing for me, and I think it was healing for my sisters, for us to go back with this consciousness and intent. And, one of the things that we did together, my sisters and I, putting this story together, is I invited them to go with me on a tour throughout Texas to visit some of the oil towns where we used to live. And so we rented a van, and we traveled around, and I did research, and one of my sisters made T-shirts that said "The Girls Come Back Tour," and so that week we laughed, we cried, we reminisced, and almost every word out of our mouth was "Remember when, remember when."
Mm-hmm. So it was therapy for all of you to go through that.
It was therapy for all of us. It was an experience I'll never forget. It was such a gift from writing this book.
I bet you'll never forget those moments with your sisters. Well, we're not going to go into the whole story. It's in the book. But
yes.
You had plenty of reasons to be very angry with your mother at times, and yet you still loved her and forgave her. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, a lot of people ask me about anger towards my mother, and for a while I was worried that maybe I had repressed that. But I don't think so. I've looked at that for a long time. And I think what happened with my mom, for some reason, we were very connected on what I consider an inner level, on an inner world level. And it was as if I was able to understand how hard that she struggled. I saw her wounds and her inabilities, and that made me almost more compassionate toward her than angry at her. It's like, when you see somebody bleeding to death, you can't be mad at them. You just almost have to have compassion for them.
Yeah. She put you in some difficult situations as a very young child, though, where you had to lie about what she was doing and her indiscretion, so to speak.
Yes, and that was very difficult. And, we have to be clear. I definitely got angry at my mother when I was growing up and did not like those situations, and oftentimes came back and pushed hard against her. But that was difficult, and I would just tell myself during those times, if I can just get through this, and I would say until I'm 18, I will be able to make different decisions for my life.
You don't talk about your family. This book covers your youth growing up, but you have daughters of your own?
I have one daughter. I have one child, and it's a daughter named Mandy.
So how is your relationship? Obviously it must be much different than your relationship with your own mother, but looking back on it, how did it influence how you raised your daughter?
I had my daughter when I was 32 years old, so my mother had me when she was 15. So I had a lot more life experience. And raising my sisters, I felt like really that Mandy was almost my third daughter, because Brenda and Joni were babies, and I had a lot of their care. And again, my daughter is so easy to raise, but I feel very fortunate that I was able to almost remother myself, it seemed like, through mothering Mandy. And I wanted to mother her in such a different way than I had been mothered. But, I noticed something really interesting is when my daughter would hit certain ages, like when she was 6 years old, I thought, wow, how did my mom send me away at 6 for 2 years? Because that was inconceivable to me. Yeah. And then when my daughter was 12, I thought, how did she put me in charge of a household and, 5 younger siblings? So those moments were, again, they were opportunities to go in and reflect on that, to heal from that, and kind of to remother from that, because my daughter didn't have to experience those things.
Right. Are you grateful? It was difficult, painful. Nobody should have to go through what you went through, but are you grateful in any way?
Oh, yes. I had this conversation. I don't know if all my sisters would say this, but I had this conversation with 3 or 4 of them, and every one of us said that we are so grateful for where we are now and who we are now. And if our past is what brought us to this very moment, and knowing that, we would experience that past again, just knowing that we could get to this very moment and to have each other and, to have this philosophy that we seem to have about reflecting back on our childhood.
Yeah. In the book, of course, there are many men in your mother's life, but the man that you call Daddy, I guess as a dad I was touched by how you look back fondly on growing up with him. Talk about that man.
He was, I call him, he was the anchor of our family. And I loved Daddy, but I didn't necessarily know he was the anchor of our family back then because my mom was such a powerful presence when she walked into the room. She kind of eclipsed everybody and everything. And Daddy traveled a lot.
Mm-hmm. Not your biological father.
No, I called him Daddy. He was my stepdad. He came into my life when I was 3 years old, and he's my father figure. He's the one that was really there for me and for my sisters for a good number of years. And so I just realized that he anchored our family, but the thing about anchors is that you don't always see them. And I was his stepchild, and I never once felt like he treated me any differently or loved me any differently than he did his natural children. And I remember once he told me, he said, every child deserves to be loved, and that's what he lived by.
And he suffered as well, didn't he?
He certainly did. He certainly did, and my heart went out to him.
Talk about your friendship with Sue Monk Kidd, the author of The Secret Life of Bees.
Well, Sue and I met 27 years ago, and we met through a mutual writer friend, and we've been friends ever since. Our friendship borders more on sisterhood, and I should know since I have 6 of them. But we enjoy each other so much, and we just found that we had a lot of things in common.
She's a big part of this book being in print, right?
Yes. She's heard my story over the years, and she just encouraged me to write the story. She said, Terry, the world needs to hear this story. And I told her that I would think about that, and I did think about it, and I decided to, it took courage to put this story out into the world.
Yeah.
And so I just decided the time was right, and kind of, if not now, then when.
Mm-hmm. Well, Terry, this is not mentioned in the book, but you founded the Thread Project, and I want everyone who reads this book to also know about the Thread Project. Of course, there, so to speak, is a thread back to the story of your book, isn't there?
Yes. Well, and certainly I think some of my childhood influenced this in that when we moved around, I began to see that people were really more alike than different. And also, I always had hope when I moved around as a child. So the Thread Project was my response to 9/11, and it was my response of feeling hopeless after that happened for our world and what was going on. And I thought, it seems like our world is hanging by a thread. And then I had the idea, well, what if we asked not every person, but people all around the world, if they would want to contribute a thread of hope to be tied to other people's threads of hope, and we would weave those into a tapestry. And so that's what I did over the course of 5 years, and thousands of people sent in very personal threads and all different kinds of fibers like guitar strings and fishing line, and we had a piece of fabric from the killing fields of Cambodia, piece of fabric woven from one of the leper colonies, Mother Teresa's leper colonies in Calcutta. And so we wove these into tapestries, and they were supposed to be tapestries of hope and diversity and people wanting to live in compassionate ways. And these have hung in the United Nations, and the cloths were also exhibited at St. Paul's Chapel across from Ground Zero on the 5-year anniversary of 9/11.
Well, you have a website, www.threadproject.com, and there are photos there, and I urge anyone listening to us now to go to the website and check it out and find ways that you can help, but also look at the photos, these beautiful tapestries that the symbolism is very powerful, Terry.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And like I said, I do think living the life that I lived just helped me realize that people are so much more alike than different, and that's just a message we can't forget in this world.
Mm-hmm. Again, the website is threadproject.com. Terry Helwig, the author of Moonlight on Linoleum, now available as an audiobook from Oasis and in print form as well. Terry, thanks for your time. God bless you.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you so much.
For Oasis Audio, I'm Wayne Shepherd.